Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Daniel Gormali, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the Sussex University Invitational IM Norm Tournament. It's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? So it took place in the Sussex University. If anyone's not been to Sussex, beautiful part of the world, I recommend you visit. My sister, actually, my older sister lives in Sussex. That's a very nice part of the world. One time we went down to Hardham, I think it's Hardimans, which is Rudyard Kipling's old house, which is a beautiful part of the world, and that's kind of on the Sussex-Kent border, I believe. But I was playing in this tournament. I was invited to play in the IM Norm tournament to give people a chance for IM Norms. One player got very close to getting the IM Norm, and that was an Irish player called Adam Collins. Now, I had a chance myself to win the tournament. And I think really the fact I had to play 18 games, so I played 9 games at Darlington, and obviously you're playing most of the days with 2 games a day. I think there were 1 or 2 that 1 game a day. Then I went the day after, I went down to Brighton, then I played the next day in the Brighton tournament. The fact that I played 18 games in 12 days, when you're an older player, that's too much really. And I think it caught up with me in the final 4 rounds because I just ran out of puff. But I'll show you some of my games, actually, quite interesting. Let's go to, what was round 2? Round 2 I had a chance, actually. I should have really won. If we flip the board. So it was an interesting moment. Like, not sure all these are the top moves. Actually, Queen A5 is probably not the best. I'm probably playing slightly superficially at this point, but it's okay. I'm fine. Yeah, Rook A4 was a good move. Yeah, I probably should have just gone Rook D8 here, but then he can maybe go back Queen B6, right? So I decided to play this. Possibly taking with a knight was also one option. I wasn't sure about this position because I don't really have a direct threat. I can't go Queen G6 because of Rook takes D5. So I probably need to move the bishop first, like Bishop A8 or something. I mean, I've clearly got very good compensation because the bishop is a very strong piece, so it's at least probably about equal, actually, this position. But I didn't do that. I took with the bishop, which is also fine. So we got this position. Queen A6. So originally I missed Queen D7, actually, when we went into this. And oh my god, I've blundered. Because, if I swap queens, I'm clearly in trouble just to pawn down. This guy's playing well. He won the first round. Against a guy who actually went on... No, he won the first round against Marta, who went on to finish maybe 2nd or 3rd. I think he finished joint 2nd. So... Yeah, so when E4, and I thought this is clever, because if you take, I take with a queen. Right? The idea is if you take, go King H7, and you cannot prevent the mate very easily. If you go Queen G4... there's knight E2 check. Win the queen. Now, it looks like this will hold. But in fact, this is actually not that easy for white. Because if you go B4, you undermine the knight. And there's Queen E3 check. So I can probably just play a mid like G5. And I'm doing very well. Followed by F5 or even F5 immediately. And my plan is to just go G5, F4, G4, F3. And what are you going to do about that sort of thing. So I don't think that was really a good option. Now the only other option was, you can't go Rook D2 because of Queen E1 mate. So King F2, but then I saw that this is very dangerous for him. And H5 is strong now. If you go here, you can't go here because of here. And then King F5, Queen E5 mate. And if you go to H4, there's G5 mate. So you'd have to go here. Sorry, you'd have to go here immediately. The idea G6, King F6 maybe is holding on. I guess it is. But then I saw Knight G6. Which looked just winning for black, actually, because I'm threatening mate in many different ways. So I don't think white can play this line. I think that's losing. So, clever idea. Hang on, sorry. It's annoying when it does that. Yeah, a lot of people go into this line against me. I have a reasonable record against it in this line. I was quite surprised when they go into this line, but it's a safe line for white. It becomes more positional. Yeah, so all this happened, and I went Queen A8, and he went F3, and I went here, and he took. And then he went Queen D2, which is fine. And then Rook C6, which again, you know, it looks a bit dangerous for white. So he goes Rook E1. Again, I think that's fine. Jack here. Rook F6. So I'd seen all this earlier. And I thought, you know, I'm doing well. Threatening... actually, I'm not sure what I'm threatening. What am I... I'm threatening Rook F2, maybe. Yeah, Rook F2 is a big threat. Because still, you know, if he passes, say, I'll go Rook F2. And he still can't take on E4 because of Rook F1, mate. And obviously, if he takes on F2, I take with check. It's very important. So somebody like Knight C2 is walking into Rook F2, and I'm in good shape. I'm probably just winning. So yeah, he's got a check on D8, but that's it. So in this position, he blundered. He went Queen C1. It's very difficult to see that you can apparently you can go to here, and then obviously you can't take because of the mate. You go Queen D1, which is a very difficult move to see, you know, for a human player. You know, so I think the problem that I had in these tournaments actually was a little bit almost like the time control wasn't long enough, and I feel like in classical time control I needed a bit more time. You know, like some of these decisions I needed a bit more time. Almost, it's almost like glorified rapid play. Now you could say that you know, you could say that it's what was I going to say? Yeah, you could say that I'm like the, you know, I won the British rapid play. I'm good at rapid play in 2024, so therefore, what does it matter? So, you know, anyway, let's go back to the game. I'm babbling a bit. So apparently that was a good defence, but he blundered here with Queen C1. Now I didn't see the win here. Now apparently I can just go Queen F5. So because I played all these sort of clever looking moves like Queen E4, Rook F6, all that kind of stuff, I'm looking around for like a sort of clever move. And you know, the idea of just playing like a calm move like Queen F5, I don't think it really occurred to me in the game. And the point is that one of the ideas is, let's say he sets up Queen B1 with the idea that if you move the Queen, there's a Rook E8. Now clearly you can't take on H3 because of check, and then Rook G6. However, after Queen B1, you have Knight F2. Sorry. Is this right? Yeah, you go Knight F2, King here, Knight D3. Very important point. That blocks this diagonal. So he doesn't have this same idea of, you know, pinning this Queen. So Rook E2, I think there's variations like this. And apparently you're winning here. It's still, I mean, even here it doesn't look that obvious why you're winning. But I think you can just go, for example, you could just go check. And then when he goes here, now you go G6. Now you can't, again, you can't, so we've removed the pin. You can't take there because of Rook F1. And there's one line I think goes something like H3, Knight F2, King here, Queen D6, King H2, Knight H3, and apparently I'm winning. So I think this was findable, but not obvious. You know, wasn't really an obvious, you know, I thought about in this position, going Queen, sorry, Knight F2, I went Knight F2. Queen F5 here would transpose, apparently. That's just as good. Because, again, you can't play this. Actually, quite a tricky idea because of this. And then it's winning. So, but yeah, I thought about Queen H4, but apparently that wasn't that great. I'm not really sure why. It felt natural, but complicated position. I went queen g4, which is a mistake. And he went queen e3. So this tends to be what was happening for me in this tournament. I was getting good positions, particularly with black, right? I was getting good positions, but then spoiling it through bad calculation under pressure, or just generally not finishing the game off very well. Getting nervous maybe. I went g5. It's probably not a very good move, but okay, it is what it is. So my idea was to trick him. If he goes here, my idea was to go knight h3 check. And then queen d4 and his forced checkmate. But obviously he's not going to fall for that. It's too obvious. So he went c5. It's kind of, yeah, he's playing these good moves. You know, that's why he did well in the tournament. Moves like c5. So I'm thinking here about moving the queen, you know, but I'm worried that I thought about queen b4. But then I thought maybe he just goes c6, right? Rook e6, c7. Stuff like that. Oh, but then there's queen e1, right? Which, again, I didn't see. So maybe queen b4 here was possible. But queen b4 has also got other moves, like maybe knight c2 is possible. It's kind of, you know, I'm losing a bit of control here, really. You know, the advantage, queen b4 has also got rook f1, right? That might be a problem, because knight h3 now he can take with a pawn because I've moved the queen away. So again, I didn't have much time. I went knight d1. He didn't have much time either. He went queen d2. And but that was actually a blunder. Queen d2. Knight d1 was a blunder. He should have got h3, not obvious. h3 was apparently winning. Just a very calm kind of sociopathic move. I'm in big trouble, because if I take the queen, he takes, and then he's probably just going to win with these connectors. So that would have put me in big trouble. I was lucky that he didn't find h3. So he was very short of time. And he decided in the end to just repeat. Actually, you know what I was hoping for? Actually, I was hoping for queen e4 rook. I think that's why I went knight d1, because I was hoping for this, which is kind of, again, a bit transparent. Yeah, and again, I think he's in trouble now, because this is just big trouble. Like, how does he defend against all these threats? Like, if he takes here, just get check, and then it's going to be forced checkmate, the usual way, right? Check. So, yeah, I think queen a5, same problem. Queen d4, rook f1, queen d4. So he's lost here. So that was what I was hoping for, this kind of superficial trap, which people can fall into. I've been known to fall into similar. So it's not inconceivable, but obviously that wasn't a great game. And then let's move on to round 4. So round 4 drew. Round 3, I think I won. I did win. That was a decent win against Indy. Let's just go to the crucial moment, actually, probably the whole game, where, yeah, here I've made a mistake. I should have gone rook h4, and up to this point I've actually played quite a good game. It's probably my best game at the tournament up to this point. Now, this would have like confirmed White's advantage, because if you go f6, you go rook g4 check, and when you move the king back, you take on f6. Now, Indy is a player that I've always struggled to beat, because he's very good defensively. He's a very solid player. He's not your typical younger player in a way. You know, he plays quite good positional chess, and he's just very tough to beat. So that's why, you know, I've had 3 whites against him, classical chess. I've never been black against him, I don't think. But again, that might be wrong. My memory is failing, but... and I've drawn it. I drew both games before this, and this is the only one I won. So when I went rook h5, I think the point is that, yeah, you need this square for the check when he goes f6, because f6 is his defense, right? But the reason I didn't go rook h4 is I thought he's walking into this with tempo. But the point is that doesn't really change the evaluation, because you still go king f2 and you're ready to do this, or rook g4. You know, so... But I went here, and now, of course, he should go f6. And I think if he'd gone f6, game would have ended in a draw. No doubt about it. Probably, you know, maybe even a win for black, right? Well, apparently I'm still slightly better here. But I was very relieved when he didn't do that. So I think he kind of, yeah, he was short of time again. And that's often why you have an advantage in these kind of, if you are a fast player. And I generally felt in control of most of my games, because I was up on the clock for most of my games. Even the last round until near the very end, I was up on the clock. So yeah, the point is now you've got this bind now. You're threatening knight f6, and I don't think he's really got any good defences to that. Knight f6 is just a huge threat, so he decided to give up pawn. I mean, there's probably other ways to win. Knight f6 is also strong. Anyway, I went there and then he went there. I think he'd forgotten that when you take, you have knight f3, but I think the position was bad by this point anyway. Now apparently f5 was the most convincing. And the point is you get e6 and f6. That's quite important. So base is just game over. Or maybe you can go rook back, say, and when I go e6, go rook d5. There's maybe some sort of try, but then e7 must be winning. Like e7, king g7, rook g1. e7 you take on d4. Oh no, you can take on d4, right? But even king f3 here is just game over because you just get this. So, but I think what I played was also good enough anyway. It didn't really matter by this point. And then you go into this king and pawn endgame, which is totally winning. So it's funny actually because he resigned, and I was a little bit surprised because I thought he was going to go here, and after this go here. And what I'd forgotten about, I thought h4 was stalemate when I was calculating it. Which is horrendous, right? But I was actually just intending to go here, which is still completely winning because you can gradually, if he's got the A pawn, maybe just A pawns might be a bit different because we've got the B pawn as well. I'm also going to wipe out the B pawn, so I'm going to give up my H pawn and then wipe out his A and B pawns. A very simple win, but apparently here I can just go H4. Of course, it's very simple if you calculate it, and you queen and you win. So I won that game, was happy. Then round 4 I probably should have played on against Peter Large. Round 5, again, good win against a young Irish player. But the serious mistakes again. As you might expect, you know, this is not the candidates. This is... She had this twice in the same tournament this time with Bishop b5. It's not very good. It's trappy, but it's not that great. It's kind of like a lazy way to avoid playing mainline Sicilian. So the critical position in the opening probably was around about here, and he went here and up. Yeah, here I was kind of deciding between f5 and e5, and I made the wrong decision. Not for the first time. I should go f5. The reason I should go f5, that's kind of what I was thinking in the game, is kind of makes his bishop a bit more relevant. So bishop here. Bishop here is more relevant because it's doing stuff after you go f5. If he goes e5, you can always go bishop g5. You get a bit of a bind probably. Other ideas like g4, I saw that as well. Yeah, I mean, for example, you could go here. Now, I was thinking about g4, but I didn't like d5. And then he opens up the diagonal for the bishop, potentially, even if he gives up a pawn. I mean, maybe this isn't that clear either, but you don't want to walk into something like that. Oh no, hang on, check is in the pin. But you could maybe take with a pawn as well. Sometimes you can even give up a pawn. But what you do is you go f5. Now if he goes bishop d7, now you go g4. And although it looks very weakening, it's quite dangerous initiative for white. He can't really castle because of g5. Well, he can castle, but it looks scary. So a bit of a mess anyway, but after f5, what I missed was after this. I thought you could take here. But there's a very strong move here for white, which I missed in my calculations. So again, you know, I think this is the problem that I'm having in these tournaments, and especially maybe due to the time control that I feel pressured to make decisions quickly, because it's quite a fast time control. You get an hour and a half plus increment to play all your moves. You don't get any extra time on move 40. But normally I'm quite a fast player anyway. But in this position, there's a very strong idea which I've heard. So again, you know, have a think about it. Pause your video and think about what white should play here. There's various ideas, but there's only one very strong idea, I think. Okay, so basically, what I was calculating the game, if we go back, he's just going to go here and he's consolidated, he's fine. But apparently you don't take because it just, I don't think this really works. At 95, you can just come here, or, you know, he's fine. What you do, in this position you go e5. Very strong idea, which I'd missed in the game. And the point is, if he takes here, you take on f6. And when he takes, you have knight d5, and this is just really crushing, you know, just show you a nice variation. This is checkmate already. So, yeah, I missed that. And again, you know, not taking the variations far enough and backing off. So I went there, which I kind of wasn't convinced about in the game, I must admit. And he should take and go knight d7, and black already clearly better. And the reason he's clearly better is because it's not going to be easy for white to attack on the king side. You go bishop f4, you go queen g4, but at some point he just goes g6. You know, also you have to go bishop f4, rook e1 to defend e5 before you go queen g4 probably. And he can always defend on the king side quite easily. And he's got a great play on the queen side eventually with knight c5 and taking on b3. So I think he played too cautiously here. He went knight d5, which was fine, but he could have gone for the advantage. And now rook e1 was possible for white. But I took. And yeah, I misevaluated. Firstly, he could go check, actually, which I was surprised he didn't do. And if I go here, he just takes. Now, he's not going to move the bishop because I'm just going to take these pawns or whatever. But he can take. And now he's threatening to go here. I think this is equal, actually. Because I can go here or something. It's probably just equal. Maybe there's other stuff that I'm missing. I mean, I can also just move the king here as well. But then he takes with the queen, which, of course, is what he wants to do, right? Then he's doing very well. He must be doing very well. But he took the pawn, which is also quite clever. And I realised I was blundering here. Because my original instincts was queen g4, castles, bishop h6. Which anyway fails to queen e5, I think. But actually you could just go queen b6. So that's what I originally calculated. I originally calculated queen g4, castles, bishop h6. And I realised it's absolute rubbish because you can just go queen b6, win the bishop. So I decided to go king h1. He can't take on the c2 because of rook c1. So he continued to play good moves. He didn't rush into castling. It's quite a mature approach. These Irish players are pretty good. And again, rook c8. I didn't really want to go b3 because I felt like he'd get very quick pressure down the c file. So I went rook d1, expecting him to take on a4, and black's at least equal. I was very surprised when he didn't do that. Rook d8, I felt like that was maybe the turning point. It's still okay now, but it's starting to become tricky for him. Again, I think maybe moves at f6 are maybe his best shot. I think started to outplay him at this point. And again, maybe fatigue as well. I felt like he was getting tired as well because, again, it's tough for these players as well because they're playing 2 games in one day against strong opponents. And yeah, actually here I think I missed better chances. Oh yeah, here, yeah, there's a very strong idea which I missed in the game and I should have seen it actually. It was a5. So if he tries to win the pawn, he's just going to run into trouble like here. Like, this is just dead, right? You could just resign, I think. I mean, king h7 is the same problem. And I think f6 is this winning? Actually, f6 is kind of... I don't know, but f6 you have rook d6 maybe. Because queen e5 you can trade and take on b6 and I'm not sure. Something like this. Or rook d5 immediately is also maybe playable for white. Just stop this idea of the queen coming back later. But that didn't happen. The point is actually, yeah, if you take, you go c5 and apparently that's just winning. And I missed that idea in the game. And I missed his next move, a5, very clever move. And it actually becomes tricky because at rook b6 he wants to go rook e7. And rook f6, rook e3, rook b6 is better for white, but you know he's got chances. So I did this, and yeah. So here I should go here. I saw this move, but I miscalculated it again because I thought b2 is a draw because if king h2 he has rook c6. If a7. He goes rook a3. No, is that right? No, a7, rook c6. That's the point. I think. Rook b2, rook a2, rook a6. So A7, rook takes C6. If you queen, you take on B6. And then black's actually winning. And if rook B2, he goes rook A6. And that's a draw. Probably. But I can just win by this. And then basically it's similar to the game, but maybe a slightly better version because his king is so far away from the A pawn. So he has to only move rook A8. And now I come up with a king and basically it's a win. I mean, you probably start with that move. And then you gradually come up with a king. Probably don't even need that. Probably just go king G1 actually. And it's quite a simple win. It's actually turned out to be the case in the game as well, fortunately for me. So I went here. Now his best try is actually just to take on C6. So of course that's very difficult to do. He's one move. If his king was on F8, this would be a draw because he could go rook B6. I think that's probably a draw, right? Although he's still got chances of bringing the king across. Right, let's say king was on F8, rook B6, rook B5, trade, king E7, king G1, king D6, king F2, king C5, king E3, king takes B5, king D4, king B4, king E5, king B3, king F6, winning. So possibly it doesn't make any difference, but basically you should go into the 2 versus, the rook and 2, and but obviously that's lost anyway, so he decided not to bother, so it's kind of irrelevant by this point. And this is totally winning because I've still got the A pawn as well. So he decided to resign because the point is G5. I'm just going to pass something like king F3. If he takes on H4, it's going to go like king F4 and then wipe out his king side. And he'll win both my queen side pawns, but just to show you that variation, let's say he takes, for example, we'll go here. And he's just going to be too slow over here, I think. Take, king here, take, he's way too slow here, takes, well I've got the G pawn, so that, that's obviously winning, but let's say when he had a chance there to go H3, but again, way too far away, so I win very easily there. So that was a win. I was happy with that game, reasonably happy, even though there were mistakes. Drew with Callum Brewer. Again, I had chances in that game as well. Callum played well in that game. His phone went off the previous round. By the way, I shit myself earlier. I was walking on the road and this staffy comes running down this hill towards me. And I'm like, there's no one else around. And I'm like walking on this pavement near the hospital. Staffy comes running down, right? So, woof, woof. I'm like, oh, fucking hell, it's going to jump over the wall and down. It looks like he wants to jump over the wall and jump down to the pavement. And the owner's like laughing. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like, I jumped away, reflex. Oh my God, his Staffy's going to attack me and maul me, right? I'm just reading all these newspaper stories. Fortunately, it's right next to the general hospital. So even if it had, would have been right there, it would have been immediate surgery on hand. But it was just being friendly. But anyway, that was quite funny. But yeah, you do read about these dog attacks. They're quite scary. Some of these I don't think that was an extra large bullet. I'm pretty sure it was a Staffy. They're kind of quite similar, don't they? If you get like pit bulls are quite similar breed to Staffies, and you get, I think, extra large bullies are part pit bull, possibly. I'm not sure. So all this happened, and here again I could go on D5. So again, miscalculation. D5 is a move you want to play. Now if he takes, I'm very comfortable. I'm just going to trade and take. Now admittedly, this is probably quite drawish. That's the only problem. And that's the issue sometimes when you're facing low rated players and you're black. It's hard to win games. Because everybody's so well prepared now. People know what they're doing. Callum's a good player. He does a lot of coaching in the Brighton area. By the way, I should give a shout out to the organiser, Who-Man. He did a fantastic job of organising the event. Also ran the Open alongside the event, which was a huge success. There were lots of arbiters there. Chris Howe and his wife, and Paul McCowan. And they did a really good job of scanning and all that kind of stuff. So overall, a massive success, I kind of had a bit of an angry... We'll go into that later. I had a bit of an angry strop in the final round. But Yeah, so I went b5 with the idea of going b4 and then attacking the knight. And when the knight moves, weaken e4. I wasn't really convinced about that anyway. Because b5 is a weakening move. When you go b4, you're also weakening a6. So I wasn't completely convinced b5 was the best move. But he went a3. I did look at lines like knight h5 with the idea of getting the knight to f4, but it's a bit vague. It reminded me actually of positions that I played myself with white against Mark Hebden, where he's got a weak d pawn in the right of Pez. And I can't remember the name of that line actually. It's something like the Shigar. It's not the Shigorin, but it's similar. And you get the weak, I think Ramanujan system maybe. And black often goes knight d7 in those systems. So maybe knight d7 here was also possible. Yeah, again I could have gone d5 because what I miscalculated was here. If he goes f4, you go knight f8. I saw this. I thought if you go knight e6, I'm quite happy, right? Because if the bishop comes back, you know your pawn's blockaded. But if you get the chance to push the pawn, also when you go knight e6, you also hit f4, so you can't go back to f2 because you drop f4. And you can't go back to e3 because of d4, so your threat is knight e6. And then I saw f5, and I stopped there. You know, again, I've stopped the calculations too quickly. Bishop h4 is actually quite reasonable for black. Would have been a good practical punt, I think, you know, to win the game. Because you want, when you're playing these lower rated players, you want to get them into these kind of murky positions where they don't feel so comfortable. Still difficult to outplay them even then, but I would have had better chances. I mean, Callum had an up and down tournament. His phone went off, like I said, the previous game, because he needs his phone on him because he's local, just in case anyone contacts him. So after that, they put the phones in the locker. So he was in trouble anyway in his game against Marta, but he would have played on anyway. So this could have happened, but I didn't go. I didn't go d5. I played bishop h6, which I thought was being trappy and reasonable. Bishop f4 here again. Intuitively, that was the move I wanted to play. Should have just gone for it. I think I was overthinking it, and I was nervous, and you know, wasn't playing with any flow, you know, and queen h4 again. Maybe knight e5 was a better. I saw this idea that he was going to go bishop here, and I kind of. Yeah, this is a crucial moment. So calculate the line. Knight f3 check. I thought he wouldn't go bishop a2. I thought he would chop on e5 and just trying to hold that position. Bishop a2, knight f3 check. So knight f3 check now. G takes f3, queen h3. But then I saw he's got knight d5 with the idea that bishop takes d5, e takes d5, rook takes e2, queen takes e2, bishop f4, he's got queen e8 with checkmate. Now the reason I saw all that variations is I had a similar variation against Theo Cowrie in the tournament I played previously in Darlington. So it was a similar one where he's got this kind of back ranker with a bishop on that diagonal. So that was quite an easy variation for me to see. But basically I calculated this, and this is not good for black. You know, I tried to make stuff like rook e5. Because if he goes bishop e3, that's actually losing because of rook e5 with the idea of takes rook h5. So he's got to be slightly careful, but knight d5 is a big problem for me. And if he finds, I mean, I'm gambling. I could have gone for this and hoped that he didn't find knight d5. But if he finds knight d5, I'm in trouble. Because if say if I go here now with the idea of maybe take. But the problem is I'm not even got a threat now because bishop d5, queen d5, bishop f4 is not a threat because of queen f7, king h8, queen f6 mate. So that was all bad. Okay, so here what I should have done, and I saw this line was bishop f4 because it increases the threat of knight f3 check. Now again, it kind of puts him in a bit of a quandary. What does he do now? Because knight f3 is starting to become a serious threat. It's obviously the move I should have played, you know. And again, why didn't I play it? He can't go g3 because the queen takes h3. Why didn't I play it? Probably because I didn't spend enough time on this position. You know, I'm trying to set my hands, but I still didn't play slowly enough. So after bishop f4, apparently the best line is something like bishop e3. Then a move I think I saw bishop e3 as well in the game with the idea of just trading and go knight d5. g5 is a great move. And the idea is if you go knight d5, I just take on d5 and, you know, you just play that position. So G5 didn't look obvious to me, but yeah, again, you know, this knight needs reinforcing because in the game I played knight c4, which is not a move I was happy to play, and suddenly the position, yeah, again I should have considered queen d4, but I started playing too quickly around about this point because my ego was provoked by the fact that I'd lost my advantage and I was annoyed, and I should have slowed down and sat on my hands. And if I had done, I would have seen that queen d4 was a candidate move. Instead, I played this weak move, bishop b7, which doesn't really help my cause. So, yeah, here again, I got a good chance. I could go d5. If he takes, you trade, and then you're probably just holding. You can go e5, actually. That's his best chance for advantage, I think. But apparently it's still okay. But this is actually quite easy to hold for black, I think, because of the weakness of this b2 pawn. He's still got some chance. If he brings a king round to d2 and then holds that pawn, then he can start to work on my weaknesses. But by that point, my king's probably going to get to e7, stop his rook getting to d6. So realistically, it would have probably been a draw. But actually, in the game, I ended up in big trouble because around about here, he should have just gone knight e2, and he would have had a big advantage. But he decided to repeat. So that game ended in a draw. I played Supratit Banerjee after that. There's also a game against Marth that I played. So Supratit, I played a reasonable game in that game. It was a draw. And then I played against Martha, and he's a decent player. Yeah, so what I couldn't work out in this position was whether he could take the pawn or not. Like, what's this like? You know, have I got enough comp? So I looked at lines like bishop b5 here. But apparently that's not that. I think bishop b5, rook d1. Yeah. So I looked at lines like rook d1, knight d5, queen d5, bishop c6, queen b3, queen d7. But then you take, then white takes on d6, because if bishop a4, you got d takes e7. Bishop b3, take on f8, and take on b3. You're better. And if you take on d6 with a bishop, you've got knight e5, bishop e5, d5, and white's better. Just show that line. Rook d1, take here. Queen d7, take here. Actually, no, apparently it's not better. Apparently there's a better move here, which is rook e1. Okay. But white is slightly better there. But so the critical move is to take immediately, which obviously I saw. I wasn't sure about this, actually. Apparently bishop d5 is a good move, and yeah, so you must have calculated a lot of this as well. It doesn't give white any advantage. Because he went queen g4. I think the critical moment was around about here. As he took, and what I could have done is just taken on d4. Knight d4. And the idea is knight e7, you have knight e2 check. And I saw this, but I misevaluated it again because I thought he had knight f4. Missing that I've got bishop d6 here, which is actually quite annoying for white. Again, not obvious all these variations, right? Because bishop d6, actually, what do you play? You know, if you go rook e1, yeah, I mean, like I say, it's not obvious even if you see bishop d6 that you're better. But rook e1, I think maybe even queen a5 is a move, right? Maybe not the only move. There's also f6 is possible. Queen f6. There's possibilities here. So apparently the best move is not knight f4. Apparently the best move is something else. I'm trying to remember what it was. Maybe it was queen d3 actually. I think it's still okay, but worse. Queen e3. Yeah. Here bishop d6, rook e1, queen a5 is good for white. For black, sorry. So queen e3, bishop c5. Yeah, this is the way. This is the way that possibly you win the game. You know, if you're playing someone who he was getting sort of time even by this point, and I really should have gone for this knight d4 move because I think that was the best practical shot. A bishop h4. Sorry, after knight d4, I thought it. Apparently, this is also okay for black anyway, so I could have actually gone for this even if I hadn't seen bishop d6. I saw g5 was a move with the idea if the knight moves, you go knight e2 check. But I thought again, he's got moves there like rook d1, and if you take. Oh no, hang on, it wasn't rook d1. Maybe it was bishop d1 I was afraid of. I was afraid of bishop d1, take back with a bishop. Rook e1 actually. So I was thinking about that move. That's a bad move actually. Yeah, it's kind of a murky position, right? The whole position is very murky. But maybe if you want to win the game, you need to take on d4. I took there. Yeah, so I went knight a5, that was fine. Yeah, I thought about f6 here, but I was afraid of knight here, knight f4, yeah? Quickly. So... yeah, I'm maybe panicking over nothing, right? You know, again, you know, bishop f7. Yeah. So, okay, so I went knight c4, which I don't think was a great move. I shouldn't leave the knight in the centre. The take on b2. Yeah, it's murky. It's hard to find these weird kind of... you know, it looks very active for white. Also, bishop takes, right? Looks very active for white. So I didn't take on b2. You know, and also you're worried about moves like rook b1. You know, in practical games. So I took here. So this was also okay. Yeah, I saw bishop g5 again. That was the move I wanted to play. Didn't play it. I went queen b6. Actually, that's also okay. So not terrible. Queen d2, excellent move. Yeah, and again, I wanted to go like bishop b5, d3, right? This is a very tricky position because even though I got the initiative, C's got a lot of advantages in the long term. It's probably got the safer king. The bishop will come to h6 or g5. You know, George says these are e6 ideas, weakening my king side even more. So bishop b5, actually, that was a line that I calculated in the game. If he moves a rook, I wondered about d3, actually. That's actually not very good, but it is playable. Yeah, you just go king g8, you just improve, right? I don't think this is ever going to take there because of rook d8. Murky position, Merksville. Very, very kind of rough position, difficult to handle for both sides. Rook fd8. Yeah, I think, you know, given the time situation, I would have had good chances. Like here, well, C would have had good chances as well, actually. Yeah, let's say you go, can you go bishop d3 and then just allow this? And just, yeah, I mean, it's just more or less rough equality, I'd say. But I started floundering about it. I think bishop d5, yeah, I should have just gone bishop c4, committed. I was faffing around a bit too much. Also wasn't a great move. Yeah, she played some good moves around about here. She outplayed me. Bishop c4. That was a move I wanted to play. But actually I only looked at it later. I think I did look at it now, but I was like, yeah, that's the move I have to play really, practically. Rook b6 is a rotten move. b4. Yeah. So basically what was happening here was I was well up on the clock, but C was well down. And I was like rushing, you know, when I should be sitting on my hands and trying to work out the best move. And maybe that's due to fatigue, maybe that's due to nerves. Ego's taking over. But again, I didn't play the best moves here. Oh yeah, I thought about this move, but then I suddenly, oh, if she goes queen b4, that's quite a clever idea, right? Which I think she would have smashed that immediately. You know, it's quite a clever idea because if king g7, bishop takes c4, if bishop takes d3, queen f8, mate. Now, I did see there was a queen c8 defense, but it looked very precarious. For example, so you could take and play something like queen f6 is one option. Sorry, take and go rook e7, queen e7, sorry. And if rook c7, queen f6 check. And then still get the e6 break in. And then, you know, have... yeah, so just to show that variation, like maybe Also, bishop e4 was the move I was afraid of, actually. Because I think you can't move the rook here because rook c1. But you can go here, maybe rook b6, actually. Oh, yeah, maybe that's not so clear, right? There's still queen there, though. I'm not sure about that variation. I can push the pawn. But it looks a bit ugly doing all this, right? And then, yeah, something like this is possible. And then just try to play e6 like here. You know, something like this is like a risk-free punt for white. Queen d4. Although then rook c1, I guess, is a draw, right? Maybe you're holding after queen b4. But as soon as I saw queen b4, I was like, no, I don't really want to go for that. So around about here, I'm not doing great, but... Yes, he went rook e4, and I thought, yeah, I mentioned it after the game, h4 very dangerous for black because you don't really want to play a move like h5 because you weaken yourself further, and you line up for like queen h6, bishop g6 ideas, right? Which might not be winning, but look, you know, scary to calculate. Or maybe rook e4 like the game, but you get a better version. Yeah, but I don't know how to defend here, to be honest, because there's no way to easily relieve the pressure. So it's actually practically, because he's outplayed me over the last few moves, it's practically become difficult to hold. And yeah, stuff with, yeah, you apparently just go here and then you got to defend this really well, basically, to hold the game. I think practically it's very, very hard for black, you know. With no counterplay and constantly having to worry about your king. So he probably would have won if he played h4, to be honest. Even though he was short of time. But because he's short of time, he's worried about the time situation. So rook d4, queen c1, and I thought I could hold, but he went king 8. Oh no, hang on, this happened. Of course, here what I did was absolutely ridiculous. But again, I'm playing on a time trouble a little bit because I blitzed it out. So what I should do is queen takes f4, and after rook f4, try and hold the endgame. But of course that's depressing. You know, you don't really want to do that. If rook c5, so I calculated queen f4, rook c5. But then c could play rook b4, for example, is one possible move. If b6, then rook b5, defending the pawn. There's also rook e4 after rook c5. But then bishop f5, maybe. That's probably a draw, right? But still, you could go rook e3, bishop d3, rook d3, rook e5, rook d7. And white's better. Although, maybe then rook f5. Maybe it's... Oh, rook b5. Is it holding? Maybe it's holding. Rook b5, rook f7, rook b2. So probably that line with rook b4 is the way. But of course, you know, practically speaking... I didn't see this idea that he had in the game. So practically speaking, maybe my decision was the correct one, even though the computer says it's a terrible blunder and a losing blunder with queen b2. So it loses by force. But neither of us had seen why. I think the idea is quite hidden, to be honest. It's not obvious. You know, if you had more time, you'd probably seen this. If he'd have had, like, you know, half an hour here, obviously he's going to see the move, right? But you know, when you just got this position and she's had no time to think about the position, it's very easy to miss. I didn't see it. And, well, you know, I was shocked after the game to see that bishop g6 would have just won at once. I was very kind of lucky in that respect. Because, yeah, if you take on yeah, I mean, if you take here, it's just already immediately get checkmate, right? It's going to be checkmate. So that's not really very difficult. And obviously, if you don't take the bishop, well, what are you actually doing? You're not even got any threats, and clearly they're threatening everything, right? Queen f6 is a threat, presumably, and queen f6, king g8, bishop takes h7 is one idea. So basically, you would just resign. Or you take on d4. But after this, presumably you have to take with the h pawn. The point is that eventually, well, you could take on a7. Actually, you might as well grab another pawn. But eventually you're going to win on the king side because f4, g4, and then eventually, or even like at some point h4, h5. Very unlikely the black will hold this. Very unlikely. Maybe queen h7. Yeah, queen h7 is... Why not take the pawn, right? There's really no... I'll play this on, but in a very depressing manner, right? You know, that would have been incredibly depressing. But then the last round I played against a guy called Adrian Suraz Uriel, who I think was dating Marta because they spent a lot of time together, but I don't know. But he played pretty well in parts, but I think we both played badly at various moments as well. Like he said after the game, it was quite a bad game. I mean, I had a bit of an angry strop, even at the arbiter, because the arbiter was stood right by me, and like, I'm in a pressure situation. And I think the biggest pressure was this thing about fearing about going below 2400. So yeah, overall I enjoyed the tournament anyway. You know, would I play next year? Absolutely. You know, if they invite me back, maybe they'll do a GM norm tournament at some point as well. But it's expensive for the organisers because they're not making any money from it. They don't have any sponsors. If there's any sponsors out there who want to sponsor tournaments like that, you know, drop me a line or drop the organiser a line. But anyway, yeah, enjoyable tournament. Hopefully we'll see more tournaments in that part of the world. Because Brighton's a lovely place, you know. I've connections, family connections with Brighton. My uncle lives in Brighton. He's a Brighton football supporter, and I heard these roars when I was walking to the final game. I heard these roars from the local stadium. With massive roar because Brighton had scored a second goal. It was 2-1 in the end against Man City, who have been underperforming, of course. But Brighton's a lovely place. You know, you go there, there's just so many different cafes and shops, and you know, obviously you've got the lanes, which is very famous. So my father grew up in that part of the world. He grew up in Hove, and we used to go down, when I was younger, we used to go down to Hove to visit my grandmother, who eventually moved to London, and her name was Bridget, and she was living in Hove at that time. So my dad grew up in Hove, yeah, and we used to go on Brighton Pier. Everybody's done it, probably gone on the Brighton Pier, go on the Ghost Train. You know, you'd have the Penny Arcade and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things to do. You know, they should have another British Championships there at some point, you would think, as well. They could have that on the Sussex University site, actually. That's the thought, isn't it? To have a British Championships there, because during that period, during the period where the tournament was going on, there weren't any students there in the university. You know, it was pretty much empty because obviously it's not term time at that point. I think they were coming in by the end, right, because it's starting to come back. But so you could have British, but I don't think the actual venue we use is big enough for British. That's the problem. So whether they'd have an actual site on the actual campus itself, you could in theory have the British Championships in the Amex Stadium nearby. Fantasising a bit here, which is very close, and then people could stay on the campus. But again, do they have the facility to host like a British Championships? Anyway, those are my thoughts. Leave your thoughts down below. Please like, comment, subscribe, and so the video can get likes on the algorithm. And please support these tournaments. Please enter these tournaments. I'll leave a link down below to the tournament. And thanks again to Human for inviting me.